Hello everyone, and welcome to my presentation on the validation of a preparedness readiness to train survey in adolescent physical education students. My name is Nick Cullen-Carroll, and I'm a graduate student at Concordia University, St. Paul in Minnesota. Today I want to start you off briefly with my intro and my lit review, and then I'm going to present my methodology to everyone. And I'm going to be presenting my methodology in past tense as if I already have written this manuscript and completed the project, so I just didn't want to confuse everyone, so I wanted to start it off like that. So to intro us into this project, secondary education in the United States occurs for individuals between the age of 13 and 19. Most of them experience this in the K through 12 setting. And the students are typically expected to complete several years of physical education all the way up through high school, in which they are expected to complete 2 years of physical education, and then there are some electives available after that. Now, one of the standards for physical education is that I'm interested in particularly is the third standard, which states that students should demonstrate sociological and psychological knowledge as it pertains to physical activity. And then a substandard of this is students being able to evaluate personal psychological responses to physical activity. And I think it's within this standard that a wellness survey is warranted to help kids understand how to identify better with physical activity and create more of a holistic environment, and perhaps make them more of a stakeholder in the process. Now, in our literature review, we focused on quite a few things. We looked at just physical education as a whole in the adolescent population. We looked at wellness surveys in adolescents. We looked at preparedness being predicted from objective scales or objective tests. And then we looked at preparedness being predicted from subjective tasks. And those subjective tasks were predominantly scales. Now, all of the lit review occurred with the adolescent population in mind, except for when you come to the final set of studies, which is in that fourth section looking at preparedness via a scale. That only occurs up to the present day. It's only occurred in elite populations. And so if you look at our lit review, that's some of those studies are referred to as Kelman 2010, McLean et al., and there was also the Gaston et al. And the McGann in 2019. Well, this study was actually designed with that McGann et al. Study from 2019 that looked at scales producing a quite effective response for wellness and readiness in elite populations. With that in mind, I adopted a similar type of scale to that study, and I thought to myself, I wonder if this study would work well with adolescent athletes or adolescent physical education students for that matter. So I went ahead and before I developed the scale, I went ahead and recruited approximately 700 students from physical education 1, 2, and elective courses between the age of 13 and 19 from Banning High School, which is where I am a teacher as well as a researcher. And then I went ahead and developed some instruments. The primary instrument is going to be a 6-item psychometric scale looking at quality of sleep, quality of diet prior to the workout or prior to the test, stress, mood, muscle soreness, and energy. The scale is designed on a Likert scale. So 1 is a very bad and 5 is a very good, and then there's some measurements in between. And our main goal is to validate this specific scale through what we call construct validity by comparing it to other preparedness or readiness to train tasks. The next instrument we used was the broad jump test. The broad jump test is going to be our predominant test for comparing and validating our scale against. Another instrument that we're going to be using to help with the validation is the pre and post heart rate. Another instrument that will be involved in this study is the 20-meter beep test, which is a test of aerobic capacity. And then the final instrument we're going to be using as somewhat of a comparison with our scale, but also to validate the intensity of our 20-meter beep test, ensure that our students reach full aerobic capacity, is going to be a rate of perceived exertion. So let's go ahead and walk through some of our detailed procedures. The primary step is going to be recruiting and consent. So the students were recruited from Banning High School. The subjects were notified that this was a volunteer project, and if that was accepted by the individuals, one step further went for any of the individuals under the age of 18, and we went and asked for parent consent as well. The first visit was a walkthrough of the warm-up, the instruments, as well as familiarization with the study. So the first thing we did was some anthropometric data. We took height, weight, and we got BMI from that. We also went ahead and recorded some demographic data, including age, grade level, course enrolled, race, sex, and physical activity level. Then the subjects were taught the warm-up protocol, which was 5 minutes of walking and jogging, followed by some lunges, some quad pulls, some figure 4 hip lifts, some knee to chest hip flexions, some lateral lunges, forward and backward skips, shuffles to the left and right, karaoke to the left and right, back pedals, and sprints. The subjects were then walked through some examples of what perception was, as well as what is the perception of sleep, what is the perception of quality nutrition, stress, mood, energy level, and muscle soreness as it will be presented on the scale, just to familiarize them with the topics and ensure that they had a basic understanding coming into recording their thoughts about perception of readiness to train. After this, the subjects were walked through the basic instruments like the pre and post heart rate, the broad jump, and the 20-meter beep test, and then they were also walked through the rate of perceived exertion chart just to give them more time understanding what some of these instruments were, and again give them a basic foundational knowledge of what these tools are so they wouldn't be confused. Following the familiarization, the subjects were instructed to give maximum effort, and then we recorded a baseline for the 20-meter beep test. About 7 to 10 days later, to ensure recovery from the maximal aerobic test, the subjects arrived for the second visit. We tried to have them in at the same exact time as the familiarization visit. We used an indoor basketball gym. We tried to record temperature as well as humidity to have some amount of internal control with the testing parameters. The subjects were then instructed to fill out the preparedness survey. Then they lined up on the sideline of the 20-meter beep test course and took a seat. We took 5 minutes of rest, and then we collected a pre-heart rate. After this, the students rose up. Then they went through the warm-up protocol announced in the previous section. After this, each student was walked through the individual broad jump assessment and measured for distance. And then following the broad jump test, the subjects performed the 20-meter beep test, again being instructed to perform it as maximum as possible. The way that this was performed is if the students did not make it from one cone to another before the subsequent beep, and they did this 2 times in a row, the test would be terminated, and their final score would be the score they achieved before the 2 misses. Following the beep test, the students identified a rate of perceived exertion by pointing to a chart held up by the researcher. About 7 to 10 days later, there was a final visit. And in this final visit, the subjects again arrived to the same gym at the same time, where temperature and humidity was recorded again to try and maintain some internal control. Subjects filled out the survey. Resting heart rate was recorded after the rest period. Warm-up was performed. And broad jump was tested. Following the broad jump, the 20-meter beep test was performed again, as well as with post-exercise heart rate, which I did not mention in the second visit. The post-exercise heart rate was recorded immediately after the beep test as well. And then again, in this final visit, the session rate of perceived exertion was recorded. Following the final visit, all data was compiled and analyzed. This moves us into our design and data analysis section. So once again, our experiment was designed to measure the construct validity of this preparedness scale. All the data was recorded and then was recorded in a Microsoft Excel sheet. And then all analysis was also performed in the data analysis section of Microsoft Excel. The scores were refined into means and standard deviations, and then in order to assess the validity, the Likert scores were compared, using the Pearson R correlation to the 20-meter beep test, the broad jump test, the pre and post heart rates, and the rate of perceived exertions. And then in order to assess reliability, we will be looking at intra-class correlation scores from time point 2, which is visit 2, to time point 3, which is visit 3. This moves us to our final section, which is our ethical considerations. And in our ethical considerations, we wanted to find the best way to meet the needs of the subjects, and this was how we decided in order to protect them. An IRB was filed, as well as accepted through Concordia University St. Paul. The pre-participation forms and consent forms were filed to ensure the subjects were not only healthy, but they were volunteering to participate in this project. These forms were collected electronically, then they were filed, and then we stored them in a locked folder, which will only be accessible by the researcher. I also wanted to go a step further by stating there's no monetary or grade point related reward used to encourage participation in this project, to maintain that this project was fully voluntary by the subject population. And then once participation occurred, all the data was collected, stored, de-identified, and then again locked to protect each individual subject, locked in a document in a specific folder. So those are going to be the methods for this dissertation project. I have a very extensive references list. I apologize that you cannot read that. And if you are interested in seeing that, please throw me some comments as well as a lot of criticism. I don't think this is a perfect methodology, but I am very open and very happy to accept any type of criticism that can help me improve this project, because I want it to be amazing within the next year. Thank you, everybody. And I appreciate you spending time listening to my presentation, which was on the validation of a preparedness, readiness to train survey in adolescent physical education students. My name is Nick Cullen Carroll, and I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening.